Welcome everyone to our Packers News Camp Chat, virtually alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers begin their first non-padded on-field practices of training camp this Saturday. However, General Manager Brian Gutekunst is nowhere near done tweaking the roster. He added a couple of wide receivers to the room just over the last few days, and today we will tell you everything you need to know about the two of them. However, before we start, I want to remind you, as always, we love to hear from you. Please leave us a question, a comment, a thought, whatever is on your mind down in the chat, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope, and we will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. Jim, the Packers signed wide receiver Malik Turner just a couple days ago. He was signed by the Seattle Seahawks in 2018 as an undrafted free agent. He spent some time on the practice squad, and then he eventually made his way onto the active roster. We can take a look at some of his stats here. He played in 21 games through 2 seasons. Last season, he had 15 receptions for 245 yards and a touchdown. Seattle parts ways with Turner after rescinding his exclusive rights free agent tender, which is kind of an unusual thing. We don't usually see that. Jim, what do the Packers have in Turner?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a young player that Brian Gutekunst and his staff liked. I mean, that's not saying something that's pretty obvious. I mean, how many players at this point now, Olivia, have the Packers claimed from Seattle? Of course, John Schneider, former Packers scout, now the GM there, Brian Gutekunst, clearly his views of talent evaluation line up with John Schneider's. So, look, he's played. Obviously, there's NFL film. It's a guy who they probably feel can come in and learn the playbook. And look, Brian Gutekunst's got to cut 11 guys only by September 5th. So this gives him some options in the receiver room, NFL experience, and you don't really have to worry about sort of the undrafted rookie issue, of learning how the NFL works. But to think, this is a guy who's going to be, make a huge leap. I don't know. I mean, he's only caught a handful of passes. So, I think it's just a body to bring in and see what he has.
Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson, on his podcast with Turner as a guest, referred to Turner as potentially like a Davante Adams type. We shall see if that pans out, whether it's on the Packers or not. In addition to signing Turner over the last couple of days, the Packers claimed wide receiver Travis Fulgham after he was released by the Detroit Lions. Fulgham walked on at Old Dominion, and he was drafted by the Lions back in the 6th round of the 2019 draft. He's only played in 3 games, and he has a round of 63 snaps of offense under his belt. What did the Packers see in Fulgham to warrant a claim?
Yeah, again, I mean, this goes to the pro scouting element, and even digging up that Old Dominion file. I mean, odds are if he was drafted in the 6th round, other teams had him with a draftable grade. So Fulgham probably fit into that area of, well, if he was on the board, maybe we would have taken him, type of deal. Didn't catch any passes. Obviously, there's preseason film, and if you're into the Pro Football Focus stuff, I mean, those guys say that Fulgham had a 90-plus run blocking grade, in his 24 run snaps, which, let's be honest, that's what these receivers here in Green Bay, outside of Davante Adams, are really, it's probably their best traits at this point. So just kind of fits the profile. Again, Olivia, a year in an NFL offense and NFL playbook. Clearly and look, he might even be eligible for this, expanded 16-man practice squad. So, they may try to sneak him through. Because honestly, Olivia, at this point, when Brian Gutekunst cuts those players, there's no preseason, there's no film. So chances are you're going to be able to get all those guys back, right? So even, Fulgham, does he make the practice squad? I don't know, but odds are now if he does stay, the team will feel good about having someone who's been through 4 weeks of camp with them.
No preseason, no opportunity to play in live reps before the start of the regular season, which means it's going to be challenging for players like Fulgham, even Turner, other rookies and unproven players in this league to make the team out of camp. That being said, Jim, how are the Packers instituting some live rep-like experiences in practice to allow them to show themselves a little bit more this camp?
Yeah, it's going to push the creative limits of Matt LaFleur and his staff with this, Olivia. So there are limits and rules on how long practices can go. For instance, the first day of pads, which should be about the 20th or 21st of this month, can only be 90 minutes. The next day of pads can be 115 minutes and increase from there to a maximum of 2.5 hours. And why does that matter? Matt LaFleur said that the veterans, Aaron Rodgers, David Bakhtiari, etc., on any given day, they might practice up to 2 hours, maybe a little less. And then the rest of the practice will be given to all of the young guys. Obviously, they need to have enough of them to field, proper scrimmages, but expect Tim Boyle and Jordan Love to get most of their work then, and A.J. Dillon to get most of his work then, DeGuara. Even those second-year guys, I think, those receivers we just talked about. I think even like a Jakekumaro, or Reggie Beggleton, this is where, those guys are going to have to make the most of their reps in that sort of back end of practice when the starters, if you will, are back in Lambeau Field.
A different opportunity than what would typically be in past training camps. No preseason, so they have to do something a little bit different. It'll be interesting to see exactly what that might look like, if we get to see any of it, if it's open to the media. These are all questions that I have. I guess we'll find out soon. Let's move into some of our questions, and I think this question rolls pretty nicely right off of what we were just speaking about. The Southwest Florida Packers fan club, it's good to see you. They ask, how many wide receivers are the Packers going to keep on the initial roster? Jim, I believe it was the two of us that had this conversation. I don't recall if Ryan was the one responsible for writing the wide receivers preview for training camp or if it was you. But that being said, how many receivers do you think the Packers will want to carry onto their initial 53-man roster?
Yeah, it's interesting. So last year, they broke with 6. And then Jay Sternberger went immediately to IR. Excuse me. Gotta love the allergy season. Immediately the IR. So then Alan Lazard comes up. So essentially they had 7 to start with. This is all fascinating, Olivia, because they also only had 2 quarterbacks. I think they'll keep 3. So let's just stick to 6. I think 6 is... Look, it's going to be Sternberger, Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan, and Josiah DeGuara. Even if they call one of them an H-back, I mean, that's still kind of the tight end room. So I'm going to go with 6 receivers. And, it's going to be hard for Fulgham, Malik Turner, Reggie Beggleton to, I think, crack the 6 that they have. I think Darius Shepard does have an outside shot. Being year 2 in this offense and having some rapport with Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, I'll stick with 6 and then fit that other roster is going shorter, I guess, at another position to make up for the quarterback.
You have to shave down somewhere, and it's always hard so early when we truly haven't seen anything. Yeah. However, that being said, if you would like to check out Ryan Wood's way too early initial 53-man roster projection over on PackersNews.com, you can. We also did a live stream talking about both of our projections. That is somewhere in the archives if you're interested in taking a look at that as well. So thank you so much for your question. Well, actually, yeah, let's keep going on offense questions. We'll take Jeremy's question now. Jeremy asks, how are the Packers going to integrate the tight ends in the offense this year? The tight ends room looks a little different, not too different than it did last year. The big change is that tight end Jimmy Graham is gone. He's departed for Chicago. And the big change would be that they now have, they drafted Josiah DeGuara in the 3rd round of this year's draft. They also welcome back Mercedes Lewis, and they'll have healthy Jay Sternberger and Robert Tonyan in that room. How do you envision Matt LaFleur utilizing his tight ends this year?
Yeah, actually, to plug the return of the Green 19 podcast with Tom Silverstein dropping tomorrow. I mean, this position actually in that question is something Tom's really kind of interested in, and actually so am I, with specifically moving Sternberger and DeGuara more in line. Jimmy Graham did play with his hand in the ground, but more often than not, he was split out in kind of that slot receiver position. And really in this offense, it works better if the tight end can be on, with a hand in the ground. So let's start there. And then in terms of production, I think there's just a lot on Jay Sternberger, Olivia. I know there's so much emphasis on receivers and number 2 and 3 receiver. Honestly, it's a little redundant. I mean, here we are a year ago, or from last year's the same conversation, and I'll say the same thing. I think if they've got Davante Adams and 4 receivers catching 35 passes, like they're fine with that. I think it's Sternberger, really. He's the one who could catch 60 passes and be the number 2, if you will. So I think we'll see more of that in line to help with that motions and the deceptions in the wide zone, Jeremy. And then I do think Sternberger, they're kind of really hoping he becomes a trustworthy target for Aaron Rodgers.
There's still a lot that we haven't seen from Jay Sternberger. We saw him in a limited capacity last season as he dealt with some injuries throughout the training camp and the regular season. We saw him as a blocker. We saw him catch a touchdown, I believe, in the playoffs in that game against the San Francisco 49ers, the NFC Championship game. We'll see exactly what he has left out there for him this season. So thank you very much, Jeremy, for your question. Let's move on to Jeff here. Just to, I think we've been talking a little bit about protocols here and there in this unique time that we're in because of the coronavirus pandemic. However, I want to make sure that this is clear about what the roster size looks like. So Jeff asks, any truth that the roster will be larger this year because of COVID-19, more than 53? The active roster is set at 53. The practice squad is 16 players. However, and this was a rule instituted before the pandemic, Jim, with the new CBA, if I'm not mistaken, for game day weekend, the roster increases to 55. Am I correct here?
You know what? I've been so wrapped up in the COVID rules of the being able to shuffle players on and off in this practice squad eligibility. Well, you stumped me. So did you, Jeff. Put it this way. I mean, the active roster is what changes, and that's only if you're having an additional offensive lineman. So, we'll tweet this out, Jeff, after this and get a clarification for you for sure. Maybe put on the Facebook page. But yeah, offhand, Olivia, so much has happened since that first rule that I have definitely forgotten about that. So we'll have to refresh our memory here.
There have been so many rules coming at us left and right. Every day there's something new. They tweak something. They're testing daily up until the second week of training camp, and then they were supposed to start testing every other day if the positive rate was below 5%. However, they decided to change that, and now they're testing every day. Things are changing by the minute at the NFL level, so we will let you know if we'll tweet out some clarification for you, Jeff, on the roster sizes for this year. Good question.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Natashan. Natashan asks, or he says, Jakekumaro had his opportunity. He's 28 years old with limited talent, great story, but time to move on. Jim, a pretty critical statement of touchdown Jesus, if you will. What do you think Kumaro has to show early in training camp in order to secure a spot on the 53 this season?
Yeah, I mean, the second sentence there, 28 years old, obviously being an undrafted guy and kind of a, the fifth, sixth guy. I mean, I guess that's what limited talent means, being an NFL player. But I get what he's saying. I mean, yes, he's older than Davante Adams. Look, move on, I guess that's Brian Gutekunst. I mean, if Jakekumaro beats out Reggie Begelton and Darius Shepard and, Travis Fulgham and Malik Turner, then he beats him out. And that's the spot he gets. So, and honestly, I don't think there's an allegiance to any degree. Like, I think if those guys outplay him in this camp, they'll make the team and he won't. So, yeah, now to you, Olivia, what does he have to show? I think he's got to show what he did last year, which was, he's going to have to beat Kevin King on one-on-ones and win that matchup and catch the ball. He's going to have to become available in the red zone where Aaron Rodgers can kind of go off script and there's that symmetry and make a play where it catches the head coach's eye. I mean, it's the same thing like any, Natasha, it's like Jakekumaro is in that back, 6-7 guys of the roster where there's no draft status, there's no contract. They like him, they know what he can do, but you always have to prove it. So when you say move on, I think it's as simple as, does he win the job over everyone else? And I guess you would argue then in a game, can he do what Allen Lazard did? Going forward, that's obviously in the future, but I think that's where those guys are at in that back end of the receiver room. They just have to make plays in this 4-week period.
Not a lot of time to prove themselves. Jakekumaro is not the only one who's going to be under the microscope a little bit during this training camp period. It's a good question. It's a good point. Something that we'll have to see as it plays out as training camp continues. Let's move on to Dan. Dan asks, how many running backs do the Packers keep on the roster, the initial roster? Dan is saying 5, which sounds like a lot to me, but perhaps you think it is a pretty crowded room there with running backs Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams being the clear 1 and 2. However, there's also A.J. Dillon, the second-round pick. And then it gets a little bit crowded, even a little bit deeper there with Tyler Ervin, who is the return specialist. However, he has played a role late in the season in this offense. Then there's Dexter Williams, the 6th-round pick from 2019, who did not get much of an opportunity to show himself in-game during the regular season last season. However, he will be in the mix there in the competition too, Jim. How many do you think make that initial roster?
Wow, yeah. I mean, I think in Ryan's really early roster projection, did he go with 5 as well?
He did, Yeah. Dexter Williams was the 53rd.
Was the bubble guy, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you say 5 and it just feels like too many. But then as you run it down, Tyler Ervin essentially is going to make the team, to me, as the kick returner, right? I just have a hard time. I know they worked him into some packages last year, but that was, I think, because even in his short window, he added something to the offense that Dexter Williams didn't. So that's why he was worked in as the 3rd running back, really. They drafted A.J. Dillon. So now Tyler Ervin, at best, is your 4th running back. Man, but he says 5. Like, it seems hard. I don't know. I know I'm hedging, but I guess I just haven't seen enough. I mean, I feel like Dexter Williams is for sure fighting for a roster job coming out of camp. Now, I could see all 5 of these guys somehow, being on the practice squad, and Williams being available that way. But there's film of him, so, and we talked about this, Olivia, last time. I think Jamal Williams fits that trade bait scenario a little bit. He's a proven guy that, look, I think injuries are going to happen in these next 3 weeks, so let's see there. So, Dan, I don't know. You stumped me there. There's 2 good questions, Olivia, from our watchers. I guess I can't commit to that yet because
Oh, we lost Jim. He got so flustered that he didn't know what to say. Thank you, Dan, for the question. I think now is going to have to be a good time to wrap it up because we're Jimless, and unfortunately I don't want to continue without him. We're back with Jim. Jim, are we good to keep going? I was going to keep going. I was going to wrap it up. I don't know what happened to you. We missed
you.
You
know what? Somewhere on the internet, they didn't like my hedging, and so they said you're done. So now I'm back. Sorry about that.
Some Dexter Williams must be controlling the platform somehow.
But I'm back.
Any other thoughts?
No, I was trying to talk myself out of a hole, and I think I just dug it deeper. So I think I'm kind of there on running backs. We'll see what happens.
That's all right. That's totally fine. We can move on. I was gonna end it there, but we'll take one or two more here before we sign off by not a glitch. Let's move on to Bowen over on Periscope. Bowen asks, do the Packers have a decent option next to inside linebacker Christian Kirksey on the roster, or do they still need to sign someone? This time last year, we were saying the same thing about inside linebacker Blake Martinez, who has since departed for the New York Giants. Now we're saying it about Kirksey. And even with Kirksey's injury history, there's still some question marks around him. Will he be able to stay healthy this season? Jim, who is the next player up at that second inside linebacker spot?
Yeah, it's wow. It's like the receiver redux, right? I mean, Kirksey's your starting middle linebacker, and again, I think it's Oren Burks' job to lose. I know Curtis Bolton last year really flashed as an undrafted free agent. He's coming off a torn ACL, which presume he's healthy. Ty Summers, 7th round pick, made the team because he did play well in the preseason games, but didn't get a single defensive snap last year. So I think there's going to be a legitimate competition there, but Oren Burks, year 4, can he stay healthy? And if he's healthy, can he finally show, I guess, what Brian Gutekunst thought he could? So I think he gets first crack, but I don't think Mike Pettin's afraid to say, wow, if none of these guys show out, then Raven Green's dropping down in there, and some of these Adrian Amos is going to drop down in there. We're going to play this nickel linebacker safety hybrid thing, So yeah, it's not probably the answer Bowen or Packers fans want to hear, but I think yet again, like the receivers, they're going with what they got and hope one of those guys kind of realizes some potential.
Mike Pettin is fond of using a hybrid safety linebacker type in that position. I'm sure he won't be too afraid to continue down that path. Now they have safety Raven Green. He'll be back. He's healthy. He missed the majority of last season with an injury, and Ibrahim Campbell was the one who filled in for him at that spot. Campbell is now gone. Green is healthy. So we'll see if Green ends up being a solution there. We'll see if Oren Burks is the one who's able to keep that spot. A lot of questions at that inside linebacker position. We'll move on now. One more positional battle. We're going to talk a little bit more positional battles tomorrow as well with Ryan Wood. Norman asks, who wins the 4th/5th outside linebacker spot on the initial 53? That's assuming that there are even 5 outside linebackers on the initial 53. I'm not terribly convinced that there will be, but who knows? So Za'Darius and Preston Smith are the clear 1 and 2. Rashawn Gary should also be making a jump in his year 2, especially now that he won't be even behind Kyler Fackrell, who also departed in free agency for the New York Giants. Those are your top 3. However, Jim, who comes after that?
Yeah, I agree with you that maybe 5 might be too many. You got Tim Williams, who they claimed off waivers from Baltimore. I think they feel there's a diamond in the rough thing there. But look, he was cut and had to go to the practice squad. So you give him an edge based on experience, draft status from a few years ago. Then you've got this mix of guys no one knows much about. Farrell Ramsey, Randy Ramsey, Greg Roberts, the ever mysterious Greg Roberts, currently on the COVID list, but they paid him a lot of money as an undrafted free agent last year. Kind of came back to practice late, didn't activate him. Jonathan Garvin, the 7th round pick this year, so obviously a bubble guy. You're right. I think there's 4 because you don't want to be short in case one of those Smiths or Gary tweaks something or something goes wrong early. You don't want to be that thin there. Just go with the 3. So I think it's 4, and I honestly, again, it's a really battle of unknowns at that spot. The D line actually may help determine that, Olivia, a little bit. I think if they have more guys up front, and then knowing that Zadarius and Rashawn can also play up front, I think they may, go with more D linemen. So you're right. It's a good question, Norman.
One of your dogs, Jim, either agrees or disagrees with you. I'm not sure which one.
Zosha. Zosha's a star on these things, and I think she wanted everyone to know it. Like, hey, you haven't heard me on this in a while. And so, but generally she disagrees with me. So she must think that there will be 5 outside linebackers this year.
She actually told me they're thinking 6. So, so tell her I appreciate the input, and thank you, Norman, for your question. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. Ryan Wood and I will be telling you some things that you should be keeping an eye on as the Packers get back to practice. I can't believe we're finally here. Yeah. Pretty exciting stuff. So if you haven't already subscribed to PackersNews.com, make sure you're doing so. Also, follow us on all of our social media platforms. We'll have lots of updates for you over there as training camp ramps up. For Jim, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.